What is going on, guys? Welcome to this video. My name is Cameron and this is the breakdown and extra info video for the Spider-Man PS4 Paris Games Week teaser trailer. Now, some of you guys might not know this, but Insomniac Games actually hosted a live stream last night breaking down this trailer themselves, discussing plot points of the game and actually revealing some things that many people missed about this trailer. And so that is why I'm creating this video today, because I was waiting for that live stream. And so guys, now that I've said that, we need to get into this breakdown. I cannot wait. So let's go.
With Fisk behind bars, what's next?
Alright, so of course Sony Interactive Entertainment presents Spider-Man PS4 right here. New York City looks amazing. It looks like there's so much life going around. It just looks alive, like a genuinely popularized New York City. But there isn't really too much to say about this part, so let's just budge along a little bit.
And the city's safer than ever.
Of course, the new Insomniac Games logo.
Maybe.
Okay, so of course we got our first look of Peter Parker in Spider-Man PS4. He's going to be playable throughout the game in certain sections, but this is why I wanted to wait for that live stream with the Insomniac team. They actually confirmed that those two bracelets on Peter Parker's wrists are in fact web shooters. Like, they actually confirmed this. So of course, it's already playing off the fact that Peter Parker is an experienced Spider-Man. He's 23 years old, and so he's figured out his own ways of making everything a little bit easier in terms of being Peter Parker and having easy access to becoming Spider-Man. Something else about this scene and this restaurant is the fact that they actually mentioned that this was an Italian restaurant, and they thought it was funny that an Italian restaurant serves fries. Or they were joking, I'm not too sure. But anyway, let's carry on.
Peter Parker can have more to life.
Are you in trouble?
Okay, so this is Aunt May, and she's actually working at Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative's feast shelter, and that massive sign in the background that says thank you for 5 years of service is actually for Aunt May. She's been working at the feast shelter for 5 years, so you can see that she's a very appreciated member of their volunteers or their employees or whatever it is. And so again, that is why I wanted to wait for the Insomniac Games live stream yesterday, because they confirmed this as well. Now, as for the look of Aunt May, you can see that she's got sort of browny gingery hair, and Insomniac actually touched on this and said that they didn't want a boring Aunt May that stayed at home knitting and all that grandma-ish stuff. They wanted an Aunt May that still had a lot of energy to do stuff and give back to the community and stuff like that, and so that's what they are going for. But one of my favourite things is the fact that Peter and Aunt May are this involved with the feast shelter, that it makes it that more impactful when Mr. Negative turns out to be Martin Lee, because obviously he owns the feast shelter, and so it sort of integrates itself into not only Spider-Man's life, but into Peter Parker and Aunt May's life as well. So that's awesome.
Do you need money?
No, I mean, I'm
Alright, so you can see that this is Peter Parker's apartment. This has been confirmed by the Insomniac team on that live stream, and something else that they also talked about was the fact that when they originally made this scene of the game, Peter Parker launches the door off its hinges onto the floor. But of course, they felt that was a little bit too dramatic, and so they changed it so that the door actually just swung open when Peter Parker broke in. And the Insomniac team actually mentioned that at the beginning of the game, Peter Parker's life was falling apart a little bit because he was too focused on being Spider-Man and taking down the Kingpin. Whereas at the beginning of the game, when you beat the Kingpin in a boss fight or something along those lines and he goes to prison, Spider-Man can start focusing back on his Peter Parker life again. And so they mentioned along the lines of him getting his apartment back and all that stuff. Now, some of the objects that are in here mean nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. The Insomniac team didn't mention anything about it. They just said that it was random stuff that they thought would be left behind if someone was evicted. And so there's nothing really to touch upon in this scene.
No, I'm fine.
Yeah, I think it was kind of obvious I was going to pause this bit, but as you can see, we've got the feast shelter banners, we've got food, emergency, aid, shelter, and training, and it sort of looks like this will be the main spot of the game where you will be visiting Aunt May all the time. So if you ever need to see Aunt May, you will probably come to the feast shelter, and for some reason it just gives off that safe house vibe. So I'm wondering if this could be an alternate place from Peter's apartment where you can also get alternate costumes, save your game. And something that I've just thought of is that if Peter actually gets injured or anything along those lines, or if there is an upgrade system in the game, as you can see there, the T stands for training, maybe you can add skills to Spider-Man. And of course, it's got up there with the A, it's got aid and E for emergency. If Peter Parker gets injured, maybe there is someone at this feast shelter that can help him as Spider-Man if he gets injured and like wrap him up and everything like that. Interact with Miles Morales, interact with Aunt May, etc, etc. So yeah, that's something interesting to think about. But now just really quickly, we also get another look at Peter Parker's web shooters from the back, and they look pretty cool, but you can also notice that they don't have the trigger on them, so I'm assuming either that trigger will pop out of the web shooters when Peter presses a button, or they'll be attached to his suit and Peter will have to merge the web shooters with his suit. But I can't really imagine that being a thing, because if Peter needs to use his web shooters as Peter Parker, it'll take too long to merge them with his suit, so I imagine there's something else going on there.
Care of this place.
Right here on the first page, we've got this newspaper on the wall of Martin Lee and the Feast Shelter and what looks like their staff on the front page of this newspaper. And of course, it's the Daily Bugle. It's already been confirmed in the Spider-Man PS4 universe that of course the Daily Bugle exists. It kind of has to. And Mary Jane actually works for the Daily Bugle as a reporter. Just really quickly, I wouldn't be surprised if one of these people in the newspaper stood next to Martin Lee is also a villain in this game. Like, that guy next to Martin Lee looks kind of like Dr. Octopus. And that guy on the far left kind of looks pretty evil as well. I mean, like, it looks like he could possibly become someone, so I mean, she looks evil too, but I think that's just her face. Now, as for this newspaper, we've got at the very top, we've got Fisk Financials. Of course, Kingpin is in the game, and I imagine not everybody will see him as a villain. He may be just more like a businessman until Spider-Man gets him arrested. And then the classic Spider-Man threat or menace on the newspaper. But Peter Parker has been Spider-Man for 8 years in this game, so you'd think that the Daily Bugle would know that Spider-Man is a hero by now, but they must be still running with that line. I mean, maybe something happened with Spider-Man in the game and that's why that's on there. Now, something more interesting, obviously, it says at the bottom of the newspaper that Shocker appeals conviction. Now, later in the trailer, we do actually see Shocker's character in the game, but it's nice to see that he's actually named as the Shocker and actually confirmed to be evident in the game already. And if this newspaper takes place before Spider-Man fights Shocker, it means that Shocker has actually got away with crimes before. Whereas if this newspaper is after Spider-Man fights Shocker, then it probably means that after fighting Shocker, Shocker will probably return again later in the game. Now, moving across the newspaper, we've also got taxi strike over. Now, this could mean two things. This could mean that taxi drivers have gone on strike due to maybe lack of payment or something along those lines, or it could be a strike on taxi drivers, like criminals keep attacking taxi drivers, and now it's over because something along the lines of Spider-Man maybe stopping them or something like that. To be honest though, I doubt it, and I think it might be just something normal like taxi drivers going on strike due to lack of wages or something. Yeah, I'll go with that. And now the final thing, mayor approval rating source. So obviously, Norman Osborn is being elected as mayor in this game, but it's really important that we notice later on in the trailer that it says re-elect Norman Osborn, which means that Norman Osborn has already been the mayor before. So yeah, it sounds like he's going to become mayor again or something along those lines, unless I'm wrong, but I don't know. Let's go.
It represents the best part of me.
So obviously this is Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, and the way Mr. Negative works is that he kind of has like split personalities, but it's not really a personality disorder. It's more like the Hulk with Bruce Banner and the Hulk, like where he's got like two characters within him sort of thing, and Martin Lee doesn't actually know that Mr. Negative is a thing within him. Like, he just thinks that he blacks out or maybe he just falls asleep or something, but no. Now of course you can see that Peter Parker knows Martin Lee quite well, he's a friend of his, and you can see Aunt May in the background, which means that Aunt May is actually present in Martin Lee's company. And when I say company, I don't mean Feast company, I mean like his personal presence sort of company, which will actually be fun to see when Peter Parker discovers that Martin Lee is Mr. Negative. Like, will Peter stop Aunt May from volunteering at the Feast shelter? I mean, how would you tell someone to not volunteer to help the shelter? I mean, you'll look crazy. So it'll be awesome to see how that pans out with Peter Parker.
This is Miles. He's gonna be helping out around here.
So on to the surprising things, we've got Miles Morales featured in this Spider-Man PS4 game. I actually have an idea about this. Maybe Peter Parker, when he discovers that Martin Lee is Mr. Negative, maybe Miles is already Spider-Man in this game, and Peter actually puts Miles forward to work with Aunt May at the shelter so he can protect her if anything goes wrong. You know, because obviously Aunt May works at the shelter in which Martin Lee / Mr. Negative owns. What do you think about that? Let me know in the comments below. It could happen. Now, during that Insomniac live stream, it was actually mentioned that they never actually had any intentions to include Miles Morales in this story for Spider-Man PS4. He was actually added later on when they realized that they could actually use another character. Now obviously they needed to get permission to use Miles Morales and add another character and all that, but as you can see, it worked out. Now you can see Miles being introduced to Aunt May, obviously at the feast shelter, obviously volunteering, and Insomniac Games haven't mentioned that you can play as Miles or anything along those lines, but they did say when the time is right, they will give further details on whether Miles is Spider-Man and all that crazy stuff. So we'll just have to wait for that.
For acts of extraordinary.
This is our very first look at Norman Osborn in the Spider-Man PS4 game, and he looks like an aged Norman Osborn. As you can see, it says re-elect Osborn, which means he's already been mayor before, and it would be interesting to see if Norman Osborn is actually the big crime boss in the city. You know, kind of like the big man of crime in the Spectacular Spider-Man series. I mean, it would make sense for Norman Osborn to be mayor and also be the biggest crime boss in the city as well. I mean, that'd be interesting, but obviously nothing in this trailer or anything that's mentioned at all points to that. So we'll just have to wait, but that would be a cool idea.
Brave. I'm the one who kept order in this city.
So this isn't necessarily a first look at Kingpin, but it's the first time we technically see Kingpin without him on a phone screen or something like that in a picture, etc. But just in that clip there, you could hear him say that he was the one who kept order in that city. So it was actually mentioned by the Insomniac team on that live stream that obviously at the beginning of the game, as I've already mentioned, you put Kingpin in prison, and then of course Spider-Man thinks that he can go back to his Peter Parker life a little bit and sort of work on that. But the Insomniac team do say that, well, now that Kingpin is behind bars, all of these villains start popping up ready to take Kingpin's place. And it's important to note that even though Mr. Negative is potentially the main villain of the game, the Insomniac team have promised us that there is a massive collection of villains in this game. I mean, there could be Dr. Octopus, Mysterio, Norman Osborn is in the game, so I'm going to assume Green Goblin is in it as well. We could also have Electro, the Chameleon, maybe Hydro Man. I hope the Hydro Man's in it. I mean, that'd be awesome. But going back to what's on screen with Kingpin at the minute, you can see that he's got some damage on his face and his suit, and that's of course from his battle with Spider-Man.
I'm the one who kept order in this city.
What is this? Devil's breath.
Okay, so this is pretty much the very first time we see Mary Jane in the Spider-Man PS4 game. We saw her at the beginning of the trailer and also heard her voice at the beginning of the trailer. I think she looks awesome. She's got that red glowing hair that Mary Jane is supposed to have, and of course we know that she's a reporter for the Daily Bugle, so it means that she's going to be getting herself in some sticky situations and maybe even sometimes Spider-Man having to get involved because she's in need of help. And I think that's really cool because obviously Mary Jane in the comics is pretty much an independent character. She can do everything herself. She doesn't really need approval from anybody, and this is basically what's happening in this game, where she just goes out there and gets whatever she wants in terms of being a reporter, you know, sort of going to the extra lengths for her job, etc, etc. Now going into this Devil's Breath sort of stuff right here, Devil's Breath is a bionic weapon which sort of targets DNA. So for example, in one of the Amazing Spider-Man storylines, Mr. Negative actually creates Devil's Breath using some of Spider-Man's blood, which means that Devil's Breath can only kill Spider-Man. And so this bionic weapon is targeted like that. It's got to be someone's certain DNA or something along those lines. So it'd be interesting to see how Mr. Negative can use this sort of against Spider-Man. Like he could use some of Spider-Man's blood to make it kill Spider-Man, or he could use some of Mary Jane's blood to make it only kill Mary Jane, or even Aunt May. Also, just to point out, it is a gas, so it has to be breathed in. But yeah, that's pretty much what Devil's Breath is. It's a weapon created by Mr. Negative. Also, I just saw this here, and Kyra or Kira Chemicals doesn't really exist in the Marvel Universe. There is a character, or I think there is, called Kira or Kyra, but I couldn't find anything particularly obvious or anything like that. Like, honestly, that doesn't mean anything. It's just a random name as far as I am aware anyway.
Your city and everything you care about.
This part is one of my favourite scenes of the entire trailer. Not only does this city look amazing and well detailed and just awesome, but this building right here is the Sanctum Sanctorum of Doctor Strange, and the Insomniac team on the live stream did in fact confirm this. Now it's pretty funny because they also mentioned that hardly anybody spotted it, and honestly, I didn't spot it when I first watched this trailer either. Now one thing that has to be pointed out is that it doesn't mean we're going to bump into Doctor Strange or anything like that, but it's very specifically a Marvel Universe New York City. So for example, Spider-Man could swing past Doctor Strange's place and mention Doctor Strange, and also the Insomniac team on that live stream mentioned that there is a Hell's Kitchen in this New York in the game, which means that obviously that is the home district of Daredevil. And speaking of districts, it is also mentioned that there is multiple districts within this New York City, and the environmental designers of this game actually did some impressive research to go out there, take loads of pictures of whatever districts they wanted to create, and try to implement them into the game as realistically as possible. So for example, you can go somewhere in real life down to a New York district, and then you can go to the exact same place in the game and you would be able to tell that they are the same district. Not to mention, it's also said they couldn't build this New York City one-to-one scale with the real New York City, but everything is pretty much all in the same place. So if you go to one building in the game, then that building will be in that same spot in real life, or something along those lines anyway, so it's pretty interesting. Now as you can see, we can't see the Avengers Tower or the Oscorp building, but I do hope that we have the Avengers Tower in this game, just because there is Doctor Strange's place right there and stuff like that.
Will be destroyed. People will beg you for help, but you won't be able to save them.
Okay, so obviously this takes place at that event with Norman Osborn talking on stage where it says re-elect Osborn, etc, etc, and you can see that this blast is caused by negative energy from what looked to be Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative. We also saw Peter Parker's spider sense in action there, and that was just a cutscene, but still awesome nonetheless. This is Yuri Watanabe, who was introduced at E3, and she works for the police department. Now apparently she is one of the few characters who work at the police department who actually trusts Spider-Man and actually thinks that he's there to do good, whereas some of the other officers think he's a menace, etc. And so Yuri Watanabe actually helps Spider-Man get information on certain things and stuff like that. So Spider-Man helps her and she helps him. This here is a pretty awesome thing because it shows that Mary Jane isn't just a damsel in distress, she actually gets herself into these dangerous situations on purpose, because obviously she's a reporter, but also she chucks herself into the action to save other people. You know, she's not afraid to sort of get in there. And of course this is a henchman of Mr. Negative's known as the Inner Demons. As you can see, this doesn't actually look like to be any of the henchmen involved with Mr. Negative, and so I believe this is either another mission or hopefully just a random heist that's happening in the city that you can choose to stop. But it does seem to be a cutscene, so it might be part of like a main mission or something, but either way, it looks awesome. Right here it looks like Spider-Man's web is on the police officer, which means that he's probably saved this police officer from this thing in the background falling on him. So I imagine that might be a quick time event, or we might actually have to save him ourselves, but it does look to be taking place potentially at the same place this explosion was caused by Mr. Negative. I've got quite a bit of stuff to talk about in this section of the trailer. As you can see there, this is actual gameplay and it looks phenomenal. Spider-Man's suit looks amazing, looks so acrobatic, and one of my favourite things is that when Spider-Man punched this guy, he actually had blood come off his face, which is awesome. I mean, there's blood in a Spider-Man game. It's not so much of a big deal, but I mean, it doesn't seem to be branded as an entirely, like, children's game, if you know what I mean. It seems that they're taking this seriously, and so it's cool to have details such as blood when you punch someone in the face. Something else that is very prevalent and surprising in this Grand Central Station is that Oscorp is everywhere. You can see that it's got Oscorp technology or Oscorp technologies all over this section of the game, and if we look closer, it kind of looks like they are developing weapons or drones or something along those lines, and this pushes me further towards the fact that Green Goblin could indeed be in this game. Ever since the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game though, I am so sick of fighting drones, so hopefully that doesn't become an annoyance if we do fight them. Funnily enough, this part of the trailer actually does look like we become Mary Jane as if she is a playable character, and that is because it is indeed true that Mary Jane is a playable character in this game, confirmed by the Insomniac team themselves. Now, they've only said that you can only play as her in certain sections of the game to push the story forwards, and what sounds really cool about that is the fact that when playing as Mary Jane, you are being put into her shoes, which means that you'll feel her vulnerabilities. You'll have to take a different approach to certain things differently to how you would with Spider-Man, and that just sounds like a really cool concept, and I cannot wait. But you can see on screen she's in a sticky situation with some of the inner demons stood around her in the same section of this game in Grand Central Station, and what I imagine is that you've sort of maybe got to distract the guards or get somewhere else so that you can sort of help Spider-Man, or maybe so Spider-Man can save you or something, and it just seems really interesting, especially because we've never had something like this in a Spider-Man game before. It's awesome.
We've got to play this just right.
So this here, really quickly, it's not necessarily something to do with the gameplay or what's going on in this scene, but during the live stream, the Insomniac team did mention that the reason why Spider-Man's suit is this shiny is because they are constantly working on the game, and so they actually did something with the lighting, and they ended up making Spider-Man's suit look like a latex material. So when the game actually releases, Spider-Man's costume won't actually look this shiny. But when the game releases, it'll look a lot more like how Spider-Man's suit is supposed to look. You know, a little bit more materialized and stuff. So just to point out, in case any of you guys were wondering why it looked like Superman's suit or something. The name Roseman's on the door right there is actually a nod to the executive creative director for Marvel Games, Bill Roseman. So yeah, nothing really too crazy, but it's still cool. But you can see Mary Jane lying on the ground there looking like she's about to get shot, and Spider-Man is about to blast through these doors. So it looks like it's still that Grand Central Station crime sort of going on, and it seems like Mary Jane is probably going to be the damsel in distress, sort of, and obviously you've got to kind of get through everyone to get to her, maybe, I don't know. Nothing really to talk about here, I just wanted to stop it and say that that looked freaking amazing.
Please stop!
Okay, so this part right here, as you can see, Mr. Negative is blasting Spider-Man with some negative energy, and it's actually been said by the Insomniac team that Mr. Negative's powers will grow as the game goes further and he will get stronger. Now, moreover, just one of the inner demons down here at the bottom of the screen actually pointing a gun at this person. Now, I'm not too sure whether this person is an important person or whether he's just a random civilian, but it is interesting.
Maybe the city needs our friend more than you think.
Wow, got a lot of stuff to talk about in this section of the trailer. I know some of you guys were confused as to whether that's actually Miles Morales putting on the suit there. No, it's been confirmed by Insomniac that that is indeed Peter Parker. Now, as for the poster on the wall, yes, that is back when Spider-Man actually took part in that wrestling match when he first became Spider-Man. And what's really awesome is that the date on it is August 11th, 2010, and this game takes place in 2018, which means Spider-Man has been Spider-Man for 8 years. And of course, Peter Parker is 23 in this game, which means he's been Spider-Man since he was 15 years old, which is extremely comic book accurate. Not to mention this Spider-Man suit that's on this poster will most likely be an alternate costume to be worn in this game, I can almost guarantee it. As for other stuff in the room, we've also got these pictures on the side, and it has been confirmed that the picture on the left is actually a picture of Aunt May and Uncle Ben, and the picture on the right is a picture of Peter Parker, Mary Jane, and one and only Harry Osborn from when these characters were back in high school. So it's going to be pretty awesome to see where Peter and Harry's relationship is at now that Peter is older, and especially now that he's Spider-Man. And not to mention that Peter Parker is actually a full-on scientist, like that is Peter Parker's job when he's not being Spider-Man. So it will be nice to see how Harry Osborn fits into that as well. Maybe he's a scientist too, like who knows. Moving over just a little bit further, we've also got this pink plant pot, and many people will miss this, and it was actually brought up in the live stream that this particular plant pot actually appears in one of the Amazing Spider-Man comics outside Peter Parker's apartment, or on the windowsill in his apartment, I can't remember. But as you can see in this game, the plant is dead, which sort of represents how organised Peter Parker's life is at the minute. Like, he can't even look after a plant. But I would like to mention that that was actually pointed out by Chris Baker, who has actually worked on previous Spider-Man games in the past that we've all played. And he's the one who actually messaged it into the live stream, I think. And it's pretty awesome to see that the Insomniac team actually know Chris Baker and were really surprised when he found this pink plant pot. So that was pretty awesome. So good on him for finding that. But now for a few mentions such as the camera on the bottom shelf at the bottom of the screen. And of course we've got that sciencey sort of molecule thing next to Spider-Man's leg. That is obviously to indicate that he's a scientist and he's into all that stuff. And as for the suit, the animation with Peter putting the mask on looked phenomenal. I'm so glad that we're able to have graphics and everything that look like that. It was awesome. Whoops, nearly forgot about this, but as you can see there on the circled one, it says rent day, and I think one of them actually says Mary Jane's birthday at the top there, but it's hard to read, so yeah. So nearly at the end of the trailer now, this is the only shot where we can see this character's face that Spider-Man is saving, and to be honest, it just looks like a normal civilian. It doesn't actually look like anybody important, and so I'm going to assume that it's just a civilian. But yeah, just thought I'd let you know about that. And now, yes guys, this has been obviously confirmed not only at the beginning of this breakdown with that newspaper thing, but also by the Insomniac team themselves that this is Shocker. And of course, it's also been confirmed that that is Herman Schultz, the main Shocker villain of the Spider-Man comics. So that's even more awesome. Now you can probably see that he doesn't look like his usual Shocker self. He's had a bit of a suit upgrade, but the Insomniac team reassured us and said that most of the villains in the game are actually extremely comic book accurate, and that if they've made any alterations, it's only slight alterations, it's nothing too crazy. So Shocker still has all his original colours, you can still tell it's the Shocker just by looking at him. And so in this scene it looks like he's robbing a bank, and that is just awesome. I always love like a bank heist in a Spider-Man game. It's always so cliche, but always really cool to play. Okay, so that is the end of this Spider-Man PS4 Paris Games Week teaser trailer breakdown, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot of information. It was so awesome telling you guys all of this stuff. And of course, the best part is that as I'm making these videos for you, I'm also learning myself more and more about this Spider-Man game. It's awesome. And of course, I'm extremely excited. Apparently, there's going to be so many villains in this game other than Mr. Negative. And I'm excited to see what other characters interact with Peter Parker that we haven't seen yet, like Harry Osborn, maybe even Gwen Stacy. I'll be especially surprised if Gwen Stacy's in this game, but hopefully they touch upon that and maybe say something along the lines of that. Maybe that's already happened and Peter Parker has already failed to save her and she's died at the hands of Green Goblin. I don't know. A fan can dream. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for listening to me talk for this long. I really appreciate it. And if you want more videos like this on Spider-Man PS4, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter for more of my thoughts on this game. And of course, to stay up to date on all of my videos as I film and edit them, hit the like button on that video. Let me know what you thought about this trailer. Let me know how excited you guys are for this game and what villains you want to see and what other characters you want to see in this game as well. The game still comes out in 2018. But on that note, it's time to end the video. So guys, thank you so much for watching and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.